Hey, I want to welcome you to today's devotion. We've got another special one that I believe will be a great blessing to your life, because we're going to be talking about the presence of God and how it is associated with the holiness of God. So let's go right now to our devotion. One of the great blessings I've had is to go to different countries and share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And there have been occasions in which I experienced something where I knew it was nothing but the presence of God. God was there. His wind was blowing. He was moving. He was at work. And it was in those times that we saw the Spirit of God do great and mighty things. One of those places was in the nation of Burundi. I went there. The country was torn in two and war. We had to get a special flight in because the airports were closed down because they were shooting down anything that came in, and it was just a very tense and difficult time. It was so dangerous for peace negotiations that they were taking place outside the country. And I went in, and oh, I tell you what, we saw God move and God work in such a mighty way. I'll never forget, just down the road from where we were preaching, there were people fighting just 10 kilometers from the stadium where I was preaching. There were Hutus and Tutsis who were shooting each other, killing each other in a war. And yet they came to the stadium together, sat down together, listened to the gospel together. And then when I gave an invitation for people to come to Christ, oh, I tell you what, God moved, God worked in such a mighty way. And people came forward. I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of them came forward, both Tutsis and Hutus together, the people who were warring against each other. They came together and they knelt. They literally fell on their faces with their faces in the ground, repenting, crying unto God, asking Him to save them, to restore them, to renew them. And God came and visited. The only way I could describe what happened was that God was with us. His presence was there. It was a holy moment, a moment in which God's presence was with us and among us. But you know, it wasn't long after that I met some friends who wanted to go to Burundi, and they said, how do you get permissions? How do you get all this stuff to get into Burundi, the war and all of this? And I said, well, all I can tell you is we prayed. They said, oh yeah, we understand, but then how do you do it? And I said, all I can tell you is we prayed. God opened the doors. God provided everything, and God's presence filled us. Oh, what we need today is we need the very presence of the living God. But there's something you need to know about God's presence. God is holy. God is absolute purity. And if we're going to come into His presence, we've got to understand that He's holy. That this is what happened with David. You know, David, the Ark of the Covenant was the place where the presence, the manifest presence of God was, and the Philistines had, and so they had carried it by cart. And so David made a cart, and he said we'd carry it back, and then one of the men touched the cart when it was about to flip over, and God's anger boiled because they were treating His presence, the place of His presence, very, very lightly. God is holy. There were a couple of mistakes that David made. First of all, he thought, well, the Philistines carried this thing on a cart. We can carry it on a cart. I want to tell you what, there's no copycats in God's kingdom. You can't do what someone else did, so I'll do this, and then you see God's presence. God's presence doesn't come because you use a method that someone else used, or you go somewhere that someone else has gone, and you follow what they've done. Now, there's a place for following leadership, following an example, but I want to tell you what, you need to know what God has said to you, because God is holy. You need to come to Him. You need to seek Him. The second thing is we must understand that God is absolute purity. We must come into His presence and not take that lightly. When we come into His presence, that He's holy, that we're standing on holy ground, and we need to come with a spirit of reverence, with a spirit of awe-strickenness in our heart, and we need to worship Him. You see, David and them, they shouted, they danced, they did all of those things. But that wasn't what brought the presence of God. The presence of God was in that ark. It's not how much you shout, how much you dance, how much you sing, how much you say amen, or how formal you are in your worship. It's what's in your heart, because that's where God comes and dwells and abides inside of us. We must reverence Him. We must be in awe of Him. stand in awe of who God is. He is in a category all His own. And then seek Him with all your heart. And when His presence fills you, oh, I tell you what, He will do great and mighty things.